Perfect. Okay, I think we're going to get started then. Um, Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this lovely event that we're putting on today. My name is Trevor Grandin. I am the Kathy and Jim Giro Acadia Early Career Fellow in Science Communication, and I'll let Louisa and Lauren do a little intro too.
Hi, yeah, my name is Luisa Liu. I am in the same fellowship as Trevor, so also a Kathy and Jim Jarrow Early Career Fellow at Acadia or at Scudic Institute, and I'm the Science Research Fellow. So I'm doing a bird ecology monitoring project in the park.
Everyone, I'm Lauren Canarum, and I'm another Gero Fellow, and my specialty is in environmental science education.
Perfect. This is our What Drives Early Career Professionals panel. Um, this afternoon, we're going to hear from 6 professionals whose backgrounds and experiences in the conservation field kind of span a bunch of different awesome uh, they just span the conservation field so widely, from communication and interpretation to research and technician work and everywhere in between. All of our speakers today have worked in some shape or form in Acadia National Park. Many have moved on to other conservation, research, or parks organizations, which is also really cool to hear about. Our speakers today are going to be Becca Stanley, Recreation Technician Lead at Friends of Acadia, Jack Beerley, Preventative Search and Rescue Ranger at the North Rim of Grand Canyon National Park, former Visual Information Specialist at Acadia, Will Green, Research Associate at the Perry Institute for Marine Science, former Biological Field Technician and Science Communicator at Friends of Acadia, Anai Garrison, Stewardship Manager at Royal River Conservation Trust, former Scudic Institute Ecology Technician, Marisa Monroe, Graduate Research Assistant and Acadia Science Fellow at the University of Maine, and finally, Chris Silcox, Education Ranger at the Scudic Education Adventure. Um, just to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started, our speakers are going to take about 10 minutes to answer the question, why do I do what I do? At the end of each presentation, we'll take about 1 or 2 questions just to kind of bridge the gap between the presenters. And if you have a question that you really want to answer that we can't get in between, go ahead and put it in the chat. We'll try and get to a bunch of questions at the very end when everyone gets to do their presentation. If you could stay muted throughout the presentation, that would be lovely. The presentation is being recorded and will be put up on the Scudic Institute YouTube and also website pretty shortly after this. So I think without further ado, we're going to start with our first presenter, Becca Stanley.
All right, it looks like I have control. Thank you so much, Trevor, and thank you for hosting us. And we've got so many great speakers today, and I'm just thank you all for being on the call. So as you know, this is the presentation, Why I Do What I Do. My name is Becca Stanley, and I work for Friends of Acadia in Bar Harbor, Maine, and I'm the Recreation Technician Coordinator. I've been working for Friends of Acadia since 2016, so since I've graduated college, and there's so many exciting things to share that I'm just gonna move forward. So of course, you have to start at childhood in some form or another. But I grew up in Louisiana, and the photos on the left are me as a youngin, a young sapling, out in nature. I could have brought photos from all different eras of being outside, but what I really like about the photo on the left is my horrible haircut. While I'm, I don't know if it's a haircut, maybe my hair growing and weird, just like nurturing and being with plants and also just in a park. Spent a lot of time outside while I was in Louisiana, understanding that Louisiana has a lot of history. And my first actual national park unit was with the Chalmette Battlefield and National Cemetery out in Chalmette, Louisiana. I also enjoyed indoor things, competition of playing chess while I was in Louisiana as well. So between being outside with my siblings and parents and rollerblading and being in Audubon Park and going to the zoo, and also indoor things like chess. I really enjoyed my childhood, and I would say that was definitely a nurturing and foundation to grow. However, in 2005, Hurricane Katrina came, and we were refugees of that hurricane. And so things kind of got shaken up in my world when I was 10. And so we moved to Illinois, which was where we had a lot of family. And while in Illinois, I really caught the bug for botany, floral and fauna particularly. But while I was in high school, there was a pivotal program. I think very much so. There was a point in life where I was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And there was a University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point satellite area called Tree Haven in Tomahawk, Wisconsin. And they took in high school students and they were able to teach them just all about nature, encompassing soil, water, I think tree ID, plant ID, that sort of thing. And that just totally rocked my world, understanding the species name. And then I think as you evolve in high school, you understand that there's just more to botany or science than just being cool. I think the understanding of what it actually takes to become a scientist really grew in my mind, of understanding the science and the data behind that. And so in AP biology and AP environmental science, I was able to grow and nurture that those data sets that you work on in school. And I think that was definitely pivotal in having some really great mentors. And I think through high school, understanding I caught the bug. I went to an environmental liberal arts school called Northland College in Wisconsin. It's in the northern part of Wisconsin, which is important because it's similar to Maine, is a forestry state. And learning all about soil and Lake Superior and kind of like honing in on one specialized thing was really important to me. Through the summers, I worked through the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness with the U.S. Forest Service, which really got me into the focus of public land, specifically a wilderness area with a big W. And then also my first venture into working in a national park as a student researcher. I was able to, it was my capstone project. So Tamarisk spa is a non-native invasive species out in the Grand Canyon. Jack, you probably know all about that. And essentially this invasive species sends a taproot down to essentially the water line, and it just sucks up all this water, and it's a non-native species. And so all these native species are like, shoot, where's all this water? And so while you would think, oh, we can just cut all these trees down, well, there's an endangered bird that would live in this non-native tree. So the question is, what do you do when an endangered bird lives in a non-native species? So that was part of my capstone. And I thoroughly enjoyed going down the Colorado River on a 30+ day voyage. That was awesome and really spurred my love for wilderness and it wasn't true wilderness, but you know what I mean, being out there. And then also in 2016, I started working for Friends of Acadia, as I had mentioned before, and I really got acquainted with the University of Maine. Because they have done so many projects in Acadia National Park, it's really hard to miss the University of Maine. Even some of our folks on this call with the University of Maine. And so between 2020 and 2023, I was in the master's program trying to understand if the reservation system on Cadillac Mountain was going to work. If they implement it, will it actually create a better visitor experience? And the answer is yes. And through that, I cannot say how fundamental mentors are. And I think with many of you, whether you're young, old, coming into the career, I think it's really important to acknowledge the mentors that you have. And so understanding my first, I would say, mentor would be Charlie Jacoby, who's actually second on the list. And he was the first person that really introduced me to social science. So while I wanted to be in forestry, he really showed me that to manage a forest, you have to understand people and understand how people move in a forest system. And then, of course, possibly my favorite person is Dr. Adam Gibson. He's my current supervisor, who works for the National Park Service. Stephanie Clement, who works for Friends of Acadia. She has been through thick and thin, has really encouraged me to pursue social science in many professional ways. And then, of course, Dr. John Daigle and Dr. Sandra Uriste Stone, who are with the University of Maine and really curated my love for social science in more ways that I can thank them. So I just wanted to shout out to them. Through that, I think most people know about Acadia National Park, but Acadia National Park is very interesting in the way that it presents itself. There are so many dynamics that you can love and be part of: the historical, environmental, outdoor recreation, sociocultural, and particularly my interest happens to lie in outdoor recreation. However, it doesn't mean that I don't interact with the historical side or the environmental side or the sociocultural side. And I'm just going to highlight two projects that we are currently working on or have been working on in some form or another that really get my juices flowing, so to speak. And this first one is Sargent Mountain. So in Acadia National Park, Sargent Mountain is the second highest mountain in the park. We currently are working with our team, the recreation technician team, and Molly Bogner, who is seen on the right there. She is working in conjunction with Jesse Wheeler, Chris Nadeau, Lauren Gibson, Adam Gibson, myself. Just there are so many partners and stakeholders. It could not be possible without everyone. And so understanding that Sargent Mountain is a subalpine environment that does have, of course, its challenges with the number of people that are coming to Acadia National Park. And when you step on vegetation, it is slightly dwarfed in the way that in this environment, things take a long time to grow. And so through that, a lot of the work from Jesse and I think Chris in previous times on Cadillac Mountain, we've seen that there's a true need to have restoration on Sargent Mountain, not just Cadillac Mountain, like we've seen historically with these fences. And the real question here is understanding if Cadillac Mountain has fences that keep people out of the vegetation, can we do the same thing on Sargent Mountain, but is more of a wilderness type area or backcountry area? And so understanding if we're meeting visitors' expectations, if they're still having a high quality experience, while still understanding that we can keep the restoration active, is some of the questions that we had. Molly was working on a survey in conjunction with us, looking at observations on folks using cameras. We also have, you can kind of see on the left there, there's a trail counter, and that counter sends an infrared beam across the trail and counts bidirectionally, so inbound and outbound hikers. So we used that in the summer. The entirety of the summit was covered in trail counters, which was really awesome. And Friends of Acadia has paid for these. So I want to shout out and thank you to them for that. And these are top of the line systems. And so we get those counts and we understand the flow. These can be implemented in the summer for this specific project, but we've also used counters in the winter for understanding snowy owl interactions. So the number of people that are going up Sargent Mountain to go see snowy owls. So the second and final case study, I guess, if you want to call it, is this particular still shot was taken by Officer Tim Rand in Acadia National Park. And this really captures the understanding and the essence of the reservation system. And what I mean by that is that the reservation system started in 2021 fully. It went from May to October, and it really captured the bound of what we thought visitation was going to capture. However, the day after the reservation system stopped completely, there's only 157 spots at Cadillac Summit, and there were 600 vehicles that were there on the day after the reservation system, meaning these people did not need a reservation permit in order to enter. And what we see here is that there are many things wrong with this. I mean, I could have just, asked anyone, what do you think is wrong with this? But really, you can see that there's multiple things here. With the number of vehicles, there's intense vegetation damage happening. The vehicle that Officer Tim Rand was in had to go from the inbound lane to the outbound lane, crossing over the double yellow line, a safety hazard. You see these vehicles on the right being in undesignated parking spots, which does contribute to the vegetation damage. And we also see that there are unsafe road conditions for our pedestrians that you kind of see on the right, if you can see them, a little bit challenging to see. But these are some of the things that our program, along with Dr. Adam Gibson, work on. And there are probably 10 concurrent projects at any one time. And the number of researchers that we work with span beyond the University of Maine and even beyond New England, which is absolutely incredible and amazing. And so this is my last slide. But in addition to the research that we conduct, there are also things outside of work that you professionally can be involved in. And one of the things that I want to encourage anyone who is between 18 and 34 is to check out the Northeast Young Leaders Council that NPCA hosts. And the Northeast is not the only place. There's Southwest and Northeast. There's pretty much in the entire United States. And NPCA was started, I believe, 3 years after the Park Service. And they have, I think, upwards of 2 million members. And really the goal of this is to bring young people into the parks, into things that maybe you normally don't go into. So shout out to Summer, who she and I were at the Acadia Advisory Council meeting. And this is part of NPCA, Northeast Youth Leaders Council, of being able to know that these events are happening, meeting with staffers, meeting with folks from the state to really push. For example, GOA, we're working on advocacy things. It's things in the background that really help propel you professionally. And I'm so, so grateful that this council exists, and it only started in April. So if you're interested in things like that, I would highly encourage you to look into them. There might not be something with NPCA that suits your age or suits your liking, but I would just encourage you to reach out and look at some of the organizations that are out there. For now, that is the end of my presentation, and I thank you for watching. And I think, Louisa, I'm going to pass it over to you, or Trevor will do some sort of fancy work and pass it over to you.
Ah, so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Becca. So if we want to take a minute or two to ask Becca any questions that we have, feel free to drop that in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we will get to those questions. Does anyone have any? Oh, Jill, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Becca, as you know, I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. I'm at home and the system doesn't always. Okay, good. As you know, I study a parking reservation system as well in Adirondack Park that has, a sliding scale popularity. Do you think people waited until the day after the system was closed to go?
That is a great question. Anecdotally, I did meet folks at the top or the summit after the reservation system closed, and they actually prolonged their stay to Acadia National Park, so they didn't have to pay the $6 fee. The $2 goes to recreation.gov and $4 goes back to Acadia National Park. Yes, people did extend their stay and they did wait. That is
This
a
is
great
why we
question.
need to put, as much time into psychology as infrastructure when we're talking about managing park visitors. Okay, I'll shut up now. Thank you. Great
Thank you,
talk.
Jill. It's so good seeing you.
Ah, wonderful. Awesome. So let's move on to the next speaker. And if you have any more questions for our wonderful speaker, Becca Stanley, let's get to those at the very end of the presentation.
Perfect. Coming up next, we've got Jack Bearley, Preventative Search and Rescue Ranger at the North Rim of Grand Canyon National Park, former Visual Information Specialist at Acadia.
All right. Hey, everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to thank Trevor for reaching out to me and connecting me up with this super cool presentation. I got to do a few visual exhibits last year, so it's really cool to stay involved with that. So, yeah, who am I? My webcam does not work, so just imagine this guy on the right talking. I worked at Acadia and Scudic Institute 12 consecutive months last year. I'm currently at Grand Canyon doing preventative search and rescue, which is essentially a mix of EMS, backcountry, and a little bit of interpretation as well. So today I'll talk a little bit about my background and why I do what I do and why I think it's important. So I grew up definitely drawing a lot. I wasn't much of a classroom kid, but I was fascinated with nature and science. I grew up in Maryland. My parents would take me out to Shenandoah, C&O Canal to enjoy the great outdoors. But yeah, didn't get too much into STEM in high school, so I ended up going to art school instead. So I studied animation at California College of the Arts, which is a school in Oakland. It's in the vicinity of Pixar. A lot of our professors are also full-time animators or employees of companies in that area. So really good work experience from them. Going from drawing cartoons at a computer to roughing it in the woods seems like a big jump, but they have a lot more in common than you'd think, especially from the interpretation or science communication perspective of it. Yeah, so animation's all about telling a story. You turn on a Pixar movie to distract your kiddo and see a little robot or a rat or whatever, and like 1.5 hours later, you might be crying or bawling your eyes out or something. So it's kind of like taking a topic and making people care about it. So I think interpretations has a lot of the same aspects. You're trying to tell a story. You get visitors from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and at Acadia, especially, you get a lot of city slickers, people from Boston or New York who might have never thought about like butterflies in their life. You want to convince them why the parks are important, why seagulls or harvesting sweetgrass is important, why are bees important, and why, green areas that are closer to them are also just as important, even if they're not, as grand as Acadia. So telling people facts is one thing, telling them why they should care is another, and you want a story to do that. From uh from a more technical side of things, oops. Sorry, my mouse is not functional. Okay. From a more technical side of things, animation is all about observing life and exaggerating it. So if you've ever seen The Lion King, all those animators studied real lines. They didn't just take that out of their heads. You want to learn how people work, how physics work, how anatomy works. For a lot of our projects, we would film ourselves playing out what the characters were doing. And I'm not going to show you any embarrassing videos of myself, but you kind of get the idea, trying to mimic life. And I got to do a very cool summer program in 2017 with Pixar. Still in touch with a lot of these folks. The young lady to the far right is a showrunner at Disney now, I believe. But I don't think you can learn everything in a classroom. And I was kind of getting bummed out by the city, so I met a random dude who was a concessionaire at Yosemite, and he kind of reminded me that, oh yeah, the national parks exist and they need people to work for them. So I took a gap year between my junior and senior year of college, and I went out to the lovely Grand Canyon. So that was the first park I worked at. I got there in 2018. I was basically doing a VIS internship with a gentleman named Michael Quinn, who's still at this park, I believe. Super cool guy. We focused on 508 compliance, which is essentially making media accessible to folks with disabilities, folks who are hard of hearing or hard of seeing. So, but we also got a lot of opportunities to be a little bit more creative and utilize our unique talents. So these are a few illustrations I did with one of the interpreters. These actually used to be animated videos, but the videos have been sadly lost to time. But yeah, these are just little illustrations featuring some aspects of lizard biology and parental care and reptiles. This is another piece I did working with George Jacoby, and these are slightly more stylized illustrations, but he's telling a story about the kaibab squirrel, which is it's a unique species of squirrel that only lives at the north rim of Grand Canyon and some of the surrounding forests there. The characters are a little bit more anthropomorphized, like they talk to each other in the story, I think. But it tells an important story about fire ecology, the natural history of this species, and yeah, we posted it out to social media, and people who've probably never heard of this random rodent got to learn a little bit more about it, got to care about it too. And that brings us to preventative search and rescue, or PSAR. So PSAR actually started at Grand Canyon, but it's since then it's expanded to other parks, including Acadia, actually. So Tim Rand has, taken the reins on that. If y'all are familiar with him, but I quickly figured out while I was working at Grand Canyon that while I did love the VIS work, I also really, really looked forward to my weekends where I would explore the nooks and crannies of the canyon. I learned that folks can work actually within the inner canyon doing this job, PSAR, education, and medical support. And it actually does have a VIS component as well. So the top left is a sticker I worked on during my internship there. If you've ever been to either Grand Canyon or Zion, you might know the rock squirrels are extremely persistent about getting food from people. And we really don't want them to get food from people. I think I heard like 2 calls on the radio last week about separate 10-year-olds getting bit by rock squirrels. So the sticker is kind of a fun way to communicate that. And then to the right, this is not my artwork, but he's kind of an icon at Grand Canyon. There's a pretty popular uh, podcaster who mentions him a lot, and I think you can actually buy shirts of this guy. His name is Victor Vomit. But right now, as a PSAR ranger, like I see people like Victor every day. And if you actually look at the statistics of before and after the PSAR program, there used to be a lot more of him. So here's a couple commissions I got from a former Inner Canyon Ranger at Grand. Oh, wait, just kidding. Sorry, my mouse is not functional. All right, here's a couple of commissions I got from a former Inner Canyon Ranger who's pretty high up supervisor at North Cascades right now. So these are illustrated by me. These are a couple of more PSAR signs on display at North Cascades. The one on the left warns about hypothermia at Lake Diablo, and the one on the right just speaks to general weather conditions in the winter. So um, these guys are a little bit more eye-catchy than just like a big old warning sign with an exclamation point on it. And shortly after Grand Canyon, I did a PSAR specific VIS internship at Yosemite. The purpose of these images is really to communicate danger to an international audience. So that's another place where illustration could be super handy, and it kind of has this comic format. So not a ton of ambiguity, I think. So got back to Oakland. I finished my senior year at California College of Arts. This is a short 7-minute film, which we definitely don't have time to watch. But if you want to Google it later, it's about a roly-poly exploring a paleological world. I graduated. I freelanced for a while. Um, this is just like a little gallery I did at a local climbing gym, but it's a pretty tough field to actually work for a studio in. I didn't really want to move to Los Angeles because I think it's a terrible city. But I was able to support myself with freelance. It is possible for artists of all kinds to make a living that way. But I saw this quote that I really liked. The good news is you can do it all yourself. Bad news is you have to. And you basically have to be your own businessman. You have to be your own agent. You've got to keep track of everything. And this is in reference to indie music, but I think it applies to publishing, writing, art. This dog is about to bark, so I apologize if you hear barking. Um, and I just didn't necessarily want to do that 40 hours a week. And then here's a couple commissions that I did. These were kind of my favorite types of commissions. All of these are for independent researchers. So we've got a few crab species, some bivalves, and a Precambrian creature called an Anomalocaris. This was really cool to learn about, kind of by extension through the researchers' information. So these were super fun to do, and a lot of uh, a lot of my commissions I got basically by advertising online, which I also got to do a little bit of work through for PBS Eons, which is a web series PBS put out. And I actually got that through a friend of mine that I found online. So networking is super important. You know, that's what you all are there to do at the science symposium. So yeah, make friends, play nice. Then 2020, something happened. I don't know if you remember what, but a lot of stuff shut down. People weren't as willing to spend money on me drawing pictures of their cat. So I finally got my EMT license that year. There's our cake. And then I moved to Southern California for a while to work as a COVID tester. I did ski patrol. I got back into the Park Service that summer as a wilderness trailhead ranger at Sequoia and Kings Canyon. Hopped around to a couple other parks, including Pinnacles, Glen Canyon, etc. But in 2022 or 23, I forget what year, I landed at Acadia and I got hired as a visual information specialist once again. So yeah, I got to work with Jay Elhard, who's a super cool dude if you've ever interacted with him, and Ashlyn, who was our 508 compliance intern that year. So yeah, one of my favorite things about working with the NPS, whether it's from a VIS or a EMS perspective, is the variety. So here we have myself and Ashlyn with some projects. We dealt with ordering and distributing park printed material like maps. There's Ashlyn's project in the middle, which is related to 508 compliance. It's an accessible wheelchair that folks who are mobility impaired can rent out to explore Echo Beach with. Um, and we also acted as liaisons for Acadia's Artists in Residence, which is a program that hosts artists from all over to create art for Acadia. So we did a ton of different things that aren't even all pictured here. And I had time to work on a few passion projects once I got all my stuff done, especially early in the season. So these are a few images I did for Pollinator Week. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a week to celebrate pollinator awareness and what we can do to help preserve native plants and the critters that help them survive. So, and I think Acadia is especially unique because of all the support we get from Scudic Institute. So the image on the left is a little jumping mouse. I had a really awesome opportunity to go out with Dr. Brittany Slavic. We got up at 3 a.m. and climbed up Sergeant Peak. I followed her around and took some photos while she was basically studying the population of rodents in human impacted areas. And we actually ended up finding out a lot of things that even she had never heard of. So some interesting parasite rodent relationships, and just being there in her presence, like while she found out about that, was really awesome. To the right, we have a seagull that was requested by Lundy Stowe, who was one of the interns for wildlife. So she focused on the herring gulls and their population. And, I like these two examples a lot because I think a lot of folks who come to the national parks, they want to see bison, they want to see grizzly bears, they want to see those big charismatic megafauna type animals. Uh, no one really knows about mice or seagulls, like it's our job to kind of make them care about those animals. We do have wildlife at Acadia, even if it's not, your classic gray wolves, bison, grizzly kind of situation. They don't know that seagull populations are decreasing, and they don't know, that we have like so many different species of rodents at Acadia and how we impact them. So yeah, hearing those researchers talk about their subjects was super inspirational, and that was one of the things I appreciated most about Acadia. So yeah, here's a poster I did last year to the left. This is just a test print. We've got some tide pool critters there to the right. So that's another little fun project I got to do. And yeah, so this summer I returned to Grand Canyon. I'm up on the North Rim now, which is a fairly remote area of the canyon. Got some really pretty fall colors right now. I've done a few smaller design projects, but nothing I posted here today. Um, Here's a few adventures that we've had. Mostly just saving people who are throwing up on the trail, but I got to do some technical rescue training, which is always very cool. And yeah, great work crew. I've really appreciated working with them, and I think I've learned a lot so far. But yeah, I'm still creating art on the side, and I definitely would not rule out returning to BIS in the future. The beauty of the National Park Service is you don't really have to stay anywhere longer than 6 months, so it's a great opportunity to, explore the country, explore what kinds of positions you like. Um, and yeah, regardless of what I'm doing, our jobs are all about communication with the public. Whether it's trying to protect the people from the park or the park from the people. VIS and illustration has tremendous potential to do that. And yeah, it's a very rewarding career field, and I'm excited that I've been able to do so many different things. And that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jack. I don't know if we'll have questions or if we'll have time for questions for Jack right now, but please save them for the end, and let's welcome our next speaker.
Perfect. Our next speaker is Will Green, Research Associate at the Perry Institute for Marine Science, former biological field technician and science communicator at Friends of Acadia.
Thank you, Trevor. And it's super awesome to be here. I'm really happy that I was able to join in. See a lot of familiar faces who I haven't seen in a while, so it's great to see you guys on the Zoom as we do these days. It's also really fitting that I'm following up on Jack because I actually live in Flagstaff, Arizona now, just about 90 minutes south of the Grand Canyon. So I'm also a deep lover of that place, and I've really enjoyed getting to know it and spend some time there. But going back in time, I'm actually from Bar Harbor. I was born on Knotsford Island, and I grew up in Halls Cove. So my parents, my dad was a botany professor at College of the Atlantic, He passed away when I was 6, but he really, like, I have all these great memories as a kid of exploring the park and, cranberry picking, especially this time of year in Northeast Creek. Um, and I feel really lucky to have had this really rich childhood kind of immersed in Acadia, and exploring it a lot. And I think that the biggest takeaway is that, like, the notion of, you know, really getting to know the natural world and care for it and be interested in environmental conservation kind of just like happened for me at a super young age. And I feel really grateful for that, because it totally guided my life going forward. And a lot of that is thanks to living like a mile from Acadia. Um, so when I was a kid, I guess when I was 10, I started to get into photography, and I kind of came at it from a strange angle, which is that I learned how to scuba dive when I was 10, and I really wanted to like show people what was underwater and take pictures of that. So I actually got into photography through scuba diving. Most people do that the other way around, but that was the inspiration for me. When I was 12, I got my advanced scuba certification right in the frigid waters of Frenchman Bay with diver Ed, who some of you may know, a wonderful character. I encourage everyone to spend some time with him on one of his dive-in theaters. Um, and yeah, so I just grew up like in the park and exploring, and I got, while I started doing photography underwater, I kind of grew up in this beautiful landscape, and so I got really excited about doing landscape photography. Um, and that kind of culminated in high school. When I was a senior, we have to at MDI, Maps of the Island High School, we had to do this project that was sort of like a capstone thing, and I decided to try to make a time lapse film of Acadia. Um, and so what that meant is that I spent the better part of a year spending time in the park, and doing these time lapses, anywhere from half an hour to 10 hours overnight, and just kind of watching clouds go by or the stars go by, or just kind of chronicling Acadia through the seasons. And that was just like the most foundational experience. It was so amazing. I got to spend hundreds of hours in the park alone, just sitting there kind of watching the world go by, and that was really special and amazing. And I got to put this cool film together, and then later gave a TED talk about it, which was really fun, right at the Criterion in Bar Harbor. Yeah, so it was sort of a cool way to blend, like, a celebration of this beautiful place that I grew up in and this passion for photography. The image you can see here is one of the stills from one of those time lapses that was a part of the film. Um, and that sort of led me to my work with Friends of Acadia. So I went to college in Vermont at Middlebury, and every summer in college, I worked for Friends of Acadia at home. Um, the first 2 years, I was the coordinator for the Acadia Youth Tech team, which later became the Acadia Digital Media team. So I spent 2 years as the coordinator, and we did all kinds of photography work in the park, documenting events, and the landscape. And we made several films about artists in residence and the trail crew, and just a sort of the beautiful functioning, the behind the scenes functioning of what makes Acadia special for everyone. Um, and then I spent 2 years working for the wildlife crew also at I was working for Friends of Acadia, but kind of worked sort of as a science communicator on the wildlife team. So I got to go out and document all these really cool wildlife projects surrounding bats and beavers and all kinds of other stuff. And that was really cool because I got to sort of combine my passions for wildlife and conservation biology with photography all at the same time. So kind of like edging closer to what I really wanted to do in my life. And yeah, I can't thank Friends of Acadia and the Park Service enough for that opportunity, because it was, really, really amazing for me and for the other people that I worked with as well. It was sort of a youth team at first, and so many of us who were on that were very much shaped by it. And I'm not the only one whose career has very much kind of like jumped off from that. Um, while I was at Middlebury, I got really interested in conservation biology and GIS, especially so geographic information systems, map making. Um, and of course, my home was my chief inspiration for that. You know, making cool maps of Acadia, trying to replicate these like old styles of path maps in digital form was a really cool project that I got to do in college. Um, and then in my senior year, I got to revisit the underwater world. I took this coral reef ecology course where we went to the Bahamas for 10 days. So I got to learn all of this amazing reef ecology and got to dive a bunch and learn how to do rapid ecological surveys down there. And while I was there, I got talking with one of the teachers of that course, who is the executive director of the Perry Institute for Marine Science, which is a nonprofit based in the Bahamas doing conservation work, education, fisheries research, and a lot of restoration of both coral and mangrove systems. And anyway, the executive director, Craig Dahlgren, got talking to me about this new technology to monitor coral reefs that involves swimming over a coral reef and taking thousands of overlapping photos and stitching them together in these 3D models. And I happened to know kind of how to use that software to do that. And so I was like, whoa, this sounds really cool. It's time lapse because you're taking sequential photos, it's scuba diving, it's photography, and it's conservation. What's not to like? It's all the things that I love in this world. And so I kind of got hooked on that. And I did an independent study and then volunteered for a while, and then eventually got a job at the Perry Institute for Marine Science, which is where I now work as a researcher. And what I sort of do with my life now is monitor coral reef change over time using this technology called photogrammetry. And I'll flip forward a slide so I can kind of describe that a tiny bit. So what the process really involves is you have a patch of coral reef and you swim over it about a meter or two away from the bottom, and you take these thousands of overlapping photos. And what you get out of it when you put it into this software that stitches it all together is a three-dimensional replica of the reef. It's like a digital snapshot of exactly what that area of reef looked like at a given point in time. And when you do that, again and again, as time goes on, you can actually see exactly how a reef changes down to the like millimeter scale. So I can see individual coral polyps and how they're changing across hundreds of square meters of reef. And of course, coral reefs are like one of the most, existentially threatened ecosystems on the planet. It's not necessarily just like, degradation. In a lot of places, it's, coral reefs themselves are facing annihilation pretty much by warming waters. And so it's this really important field to be working in, I think. And I've really fallen in love with it. It's really like the culmination of sort of all of my passions. And as I've been doing this really like very academic research, but also directly grounded in conservation efforts, a lot of this is to monitor restoration projects. I kind of realized that I wanted to, or it didn't make sense to be doing all of this academic research and not be getting a degree out of it. So I started a PhD at at Arizona State University, which is why I'm in Flagstaff right now. Except that ASU is in Phoenix and I work mostly remotely, but go down sometimes because I'm a lover of cold places. So Flagstaff is a much better fit for me. But yeah, I'm now working remotely, doing this, continuing my journey of coral monitoring and photography, and conservation, kind of all sort of wrapped into one. And really, like, I don't know, it all kind of came from my childhood and being immersed in Acadia and growing up there. And I always come back to Acadia as often as I can. So I'll be back later today, actually. So very excited about that.
Ah, so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Will. Does anyone have any questions for Will? If so, feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself. Otherwise, pop that in the chat and we'll get to it later. No one seems to have any questions right now. Okay. let's move on to our next speaker. Thanks again.
Perfect. Coming up next, we've got
Thank you.
Hanai Garrison, Stewardship Manager, the Royal River Conservation Trust, former Schoodic Institute Ecology Technician.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me here on this panel. It feels like not too long ago I was at Schoodic as an ecology field technician, so it's good to see familiar faces and share what I am up to now. So I had majored in environmental studies at college, and with it being such a broad major, there's so many different career directions I could take. There isn't one clear track to be successful, and so I wasn't really sure what I wanted to pursue. I just knew I enjoyed being outside and cared about protecting and learning more about the natural environment. So while at Schoodic, I had an absolute blast, contributing to field research projects, and I felt really fortunate to get to work in such beautiful places with people who shared my interests. And I included a picture here of me collecting data for the Cadillac Mound Restoration Project. And then so after Schoodic, and in between my job now, I tried to gain a variety of experiences and see what work environments worked for me and what didn't, at different sizes of organizations. So I moved to Portland for an AmeriCorps position through the Maine Conservation Corps. And my host site was the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, and I was helping run their Maine Healthy Beaches program. So there I gained experience working with volunteers to monitor the water quality of public swim beaches along the coast of Maine, including some on MDI, like Sand Beach, Town Beach, Sioux Harbor. And then after that, I needed a different job. So I ended up working for a small environmental testing lab close by that actually analyzed the samples from the Maine Healthy Beaches program. And while I had a great work-life balance there, I was stuck inside every day doing the same repetitive tasks. I wasn't really growing as a person. And so I missed being outside and wanted more fulfillment for my job. So when applying to a variety of other different jobs, I kind of stumbled upon this opportunity at Royal River Conservation Trust. And I hadn't worked for a land trust before, but it seemed like a great way to learn new skills, grow professionally, and get to be outside again. And it feels good to work for an organization that is actively conserving lands in our rapidly developing world. And especially now when we're seeing the effects of climate change, the increase in frequency of extreme weather events like Hurricane Helene or sea level rise and areas flooding for the first time ever. It's really especially crucial to protect and restore our ecosystems and build resilience to climate change and provide refuge for wildlife and species. And so on the left, you can see a map of the Royal River watershed and the conserved lands within that area. So we're kind of north of Portland, but kind of in between Lewiston. So that gives you an idea of the region that I'm working within. Then I also included a picture of shoreline erosion at Little John Island Preserve in Yarmouth, because after the intense storms we got last winter, there's a lot of erosion, a lot of flooding, a lot of storm debris. So another impact of climate change. And so at Royal River Conservation Trust, my job is to manage everything related to stewardship and planning and managing our preserves and conservation easements. And so my duties range from clearing down trees after a storm, improving trailblazes and signage, building bridges and removing invasive species with volunteers, and developing trail maps for our kiosks. I find it really fulfilling to get to do tangible tasks that are improving the environment and improving our trail systems and getting more people outside and connected and engaged with nature. And yeah, we've got a lot of great dedicated volunteers, and so it's good to work with them and learn from them as well. It's my mouse. Okay. Through this job, I also am constantly learning more about all the species around me, how to identify native and invasive plants, and ways to best manage a property, and how to prioritize controlling infestations of invasive species, like the hemlock woolly adelgid, like trimming branches back and, reporting it and trying to prevent its spread. Or Japanese knotweed, which you see all the time along highways and along banks of rivers. And so it's been interesting learning the most effective ways and writing management plans for our properties. I also get to experience places that I never would have gone to explore, and that's, I feel like, what I enjoy most about field work. So here I'm walking along ostrich ferns in a floodplain. And it's cool seeing our preserves change over the seasons. There's a picture of brown ash leaves from a brown ash stand that I found in one of our preserves in New Gloucester. And brown ash trees are a cultural keystone species for Wabanaki communities and are used for basket making. But with the emerald ash borer, brown, green ash, they're all being wiped out by this invasive species. And so I was excited that the stand is, healthy, and I didn't see any signs of infection yet. And so I, connecting with the ash protection collaboration across Wabanaki through University of Maine and the Maine Forest Service to, best manage this property and, potentially collect seeds. So there's lots of exciting things that come up, and the work changes day to day, but definitely learning a lot. Yeah, and that's end of my presentation. This is a finished boardwalk at Knights Pond Preserve in Cumberland. That was one of the first projects I worked with.
Awesome, Hanai. It's so great to hear from someone who formerly worked at Scudic as an ecology technician. So thank you so much for sharing. Does anyone have any quick questions for Hanai? If not, I will ask you one. Do you feel like you had a really important mentor or someone in your life, especially early on, that inspired you to do this kind of work?
I mean, there were definitely several professors at my college. I went to Oberlin College that guided me, and I was inspired by all the cool scientists at Scudic, and my supervisor with the Maine Healthy Beaches program was really great as well. And so I think it's a combination of that and just people that I meet and interact with and share passions with. So it's a combination of a lot of people.
Yeah, great people are such an important part of this work. And from personal experience, I feel like being in the field, long days, it's so nice to have people you get along with and you can crack jokes with, and they're really a huge shining spotlight in our life. Thanks, Hanai, for sharing. That's so wonderful. Yeah, let's move on to our next speaker. I believe we have 2 left.
Yep, we're going to move on with Marisa Monroe, Graduate Research Assistant and Acadia Science Fellow at the University of Maine.
Great. Hi, my name is Marisa Monroe. I am in the Wildlife, Fisheries, and Conservation Biology Department at UMaine, and I'm also a 2024 Acadia Science Fellow. And why do I do what I do? Such a great question. And I'm going to sum that up into 3 main reasons why I do what I do. I think the first is all of us have said, this love for nature and outdoors. Second is probably just this ongoing curiosity. And the third is the people. And I think this is a reiteration of what everyone else is saying. So I think we're all in the same boat here. But my path to get to what I'm doing now, it was a little circuitous or out of the way, because I didn't really know that jobs with public lands existed when I was in high school or in college. And I did some other stuff, like studied Chinese, and then I traveled the world for about 7 years. And I worked, and eventually I found my way back and knew that something was missing in my life. And I think that was this desire always to reconnect with science and nature. So I kind of accidentally, I guess, became a park ranger at Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument, which is a Forest Service site. And then from there, that just changed my life. So I just got more excited to do different and more jobs. And so I started in education and interpretation. On the left, I'm an education ranger in Sequoia and Kings Canyon, doing field trips with local area students. I think we were looking at newt phenology. And then on the right, was an interpretation ranger at Zion. And that helped me get into what I really wanted to do, was more ecological work, field jobs, natural resources. And I basically wanted to try everything. And I think it is kind of what I think of as like ecology FOMO. Like I really wanted to learn everything. So I started with the Inventory and Monitoring Network. It's the division of the National Park Service. So I was in the Sierra Nevada, so that covered Sequoia and Kings Canyon, Yosemite, and did lakes monitoring work up there in the backcountry. And moved on to fisheries back in Oregon, where I'm from, and got to play and work in the beautiful rivers that I grew up around. And then I landed for a few years down in the Mojave Desert with another inventory and monitoring network. So these monitoring networks, there's 32 across the country, and they encompass all of the National Park Service sites. So if you ever want a job that you want to travel to different national parks, but you'd like to have one home base, this is the division for you, because essentially you're a traveling scientist. So I worked in parks, Death Valley, Joshua Tree, Mojave Preserve, Great Basin, Grand Canyon Parish, and Lake Mead. And then in the summers, it was too hot to work outside most of the time. So I actually got to go work with some colleagues in other parks like Yellowstone, back in Sequoia, and Black Canyon, the Gunnison. And this is my some pictures of my ecological FOMO. But I mostly worked with aquatic ecosystems, like with benthic invertebrates and water quality, lakes and streams and springs. There's actually a lot of water in the desert. And did some bird work and bat work and vegetation work, and experienced all these different weather conditions that are part of the extreme fun of living down in the desert, as some of you know. And so that was like my curiosity, but then what really kept me coming back to these jobs and wanting to stay with, especially the Park Service or other public lands, is the people that I met and worked with. And a dream job is more than just the mountains and the lakes, but it's also the moments in between work with other people. And so they make working in extreme conditions a lot more fun as well. And working long days really more manageable and becomes somewhat of a lifestyle, I would say. So that brings me to Maine. How? Well, I was doing all this work with doing long-term monitoring, and field work is really, really fun. Can seem exciting and exotic, but I wanted to be able to take those data and apply to park management situations. And so I applied to this position at the University of Maine with my advisor, Dr. Noah Charney. And the main question is, where and when do amphibians cross the road in Acadia National Park? These are 4 of the species of amphibian in Acadia out of the possible 18 in Maine, and there's 14 in the park. So it's a very broad question because every species is going to do its own thing. They're not all going to act like each other. And amphibians are especially vulnerable to road mortality because, well, they're slow moving. Sorry, I gotta let him finish. Come on. Come on. They can be very slow moving. Yes. But how cute is this? This is an Eastern newt, if you're not familiar. I mean, I just have to let him finish. Look at that little foot. I mean, this is why I do what I do. I should have just played this video. End of the presentation. As some of you know on this call, who have been out with me looking at amphibians. And so amphibians are vulnerable because they're slow moving, but they're also attracted to roads for things like thermal regulation. I've seen peepers out on the roads when it's 39 degrees out because I think that it's warmer there on that blacktop than in their habitat, their more natural habitat. And they also forage for things on roads. So you also will see all these spiders and slugs and caterpillars just really congregate on roads. So it's kind of a lot of activity, actually. We've created this little ecosystem. And so it's a huge project. Acadia has a ton of paved roads, and I'm doing this from spring through fall. And I can really only do this with the help of my citizen scientists. And thank you. I think 4 or 5 of you on this call have helped me out over in Scudic too. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And this has been, part of that number 3, like why I do what I do. It's really getting to know the volunteers and working with the volunteers. Most of them live on Mount Desert Island, or some live in the Scudic Peninsula or nearby. And this is, I envision it as part of building that ecological relationship with our ecosystem that we live in, since we're not apart from it. And giving people the opportunity to be involved in hopefully the protection of their natural resources in their own backyards. It's also much more fun than working all alone by myself in the rain and the dark. So it's been great. And this, the second part of this amphibian project that really motivates me is that there's all these unknowns. And I really don't like being awake at night, but I do like to solve this mystery of when are things crossing the road, because there's this knowledge gap of when are the young, and this is a spotted salamander on the left that we saw last week. And you can see it hasn't even formed its spots. So it's just so young, and it's crossing the road. So imagine we save all the adults, but then all these little guys, you get run over by cars, and that could be really devastating for a population. And on the right there, that's a bunch of tiny, tiny, tiny red Fs, or Eastern newts, that also, I swear, look like so young they were translucent. So I think it's like they've just left their aquatic habitat and they're going out to forage in the terrestrial habitat for several years before they come back and breed themselves. So yeah, a lot of mystery involved, these nighttime critters that we hardly ever see. And that is super motivating for me. And I do this with help from my friends. I guess I'm just reiterating that point, but all of this work is really, for me, feels like such a calling, because it's a blend of, trying to protect our natural resources, but also like being supported emotionally by other people who are feeling the same things. Because I think it's really hard to go about this work and within that sort of ecological grief that we might all be feeling, and working with other people who are sort of carrying that burden with you, obviously brings a lot of joy into these, hard times, environmentally speaking. So, oh, if you saw that video on the right, maybe I shouldn't play that, but I've been pulled over twice so far by cops. So that was, Noah and I had, and he had his kids in the back. So we were pulled over by a very nice police officer. Just wanted to make sure we were okay, but we were doing field work. So things like that become more fun when you're with a friend. So I think that that is my last slide.
Ah, so wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing, Marisa. It's been really fun to learn about your research this summer and to assist with some of the surveys that you do at night. I actually did see a red F the other day, just crossing the road here at Scudic, near the Scudic Mountain Road. So it's really cool to see amphibs out and about. It's like, wow, I saw wildlife today on the park. Good. As someone who's explored so much in your life, like, would you say that you chose a lifestyle and then your career followed?
Yeah, I think as several of us have mentioned, like I think I figured out like the recipe for my life that I needed, just like mental and spiritual health wise. There just had to be more of an element of being outside and also working for something that supported my values. So that could have taken, I guess, different forms, but all these jobs that I've done have always felt like so happy to go to work. So never really questioned it once it started down that road.
Yeah. Does anyone from the audience have any questions? So raise your hand. Okay. I'm not seeing any, and we're doing great on time. So I think we'll have just about 10 minutes at the very end to get to more questions. I'll turn it over to Trevor for our last speaker.
Perfect. Our last presentation is a little bit of an unorthodox way of presenting. Chris, the education ranger here at Scudic Education Adventure, was whisked away on super important education work. So he will be giving his presentation remotely through a pre-recorded presentation. So yeah, Chris Silcox, education ranger at the Scudic Education Adventure.
Hello, my name is Chris Silcox. I'm an education ranger at Acadia National Park. If you're listening to this recording, it unfortunately means that the island I'm working on today has about as much internet as I feared it would, which is to say, none. I'm sorry that I can't be here with y'all live today. However, I'm excited to share with you what drives me as an early career professional. I started my career by getting a bachelor's degree in English and another one in forestry from the University of Georgia. Go Dogs! After getting those degrees, I worked for a little bit before returning to get a Master of Science in Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management, which I finished last summer. I've worked at Acadia National Park and additionally at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park, and for the Georgia Department of Natural Resources at the Charlie Elliott Wildlife Center, and for my own hometown at the Sandy Creek Nature Center. That's where I want to start us off today. I figure as we're talking about early career professionals, you can't do much earlier than kindergarten. So I want to take us back to a kindergarten classroom visit I got to participate in the spring of 2018. The school we were visiting that day was unique because it was home to the Regional Deaf Program, an opportunity for deaf and hearing impaired students to come to this school where the staff would learn how to sign and would teach many of the hearing students how to do that, thus giving these students an opportunity to have more social interactions than they might in other learning environments. That day, we were doing a kindergarten program on geology. We were passing around rocks to these students and allowing them to feel them, learn descriptive words like smooth and rough. As the rocks were being passed around the classroom, I realized that the last student to receive the rock, who was sitting right in front of me, would be a deaf student. And it would be his job to pass the rock back to me when he was done. I got very excited because I know exactly 3 words in sign language. Thank you, you're welcome, and socks. The latter word will probably not be very useful in this situation, but I knew I would be able to sign thank you to this student when he received that rock and thus make him feel more included in the program. I was so pumped. So he received the first rock and he handed it up to me, and I took it with one hand, and with the other I signed thank you. He got so excited and then immediately signed something very fast and complex back to me, which I had no idea what he said. I hesitated for a moment and then gave him a cheerful thumbs up and turned back to the other person who was presenting. I had no idea what he said, but that was okay, because I still did my best to give him a positive experience. This sort of ties into the point that I really want to bring up to all of you. If there was one piece of advice I could give to anyone, early career professional or late career professional, it is this. It's okay to not know everything. You don't have to speak multiple languages. You don't have to know the answer to every question that comes up. You don't have to know where you're going to be 5 years from now, what you want to do with your life, even where you think you're going to be a year from now. Part of the joy of life is the journey you take along it. There are many opportunities to discover new things and chances for growth. As we move through our careers, I think we're often told that we should have a set goal and a purpose. And that's good. I won't knock such things. But it is okay to have an idea, to work on a direction, to build up over time. When I first started college, I thought I wanted to be an English teacher. I knew I wanted to be an educator, but I wasn't quite sure exactly how and in what way. As I moved through, I learned about environmental ed and decided I wanted to be an environmental educator. But even then, it took me a while to decide that I wanted to be an environmental educator with the Park Service, that I specifically wanted to be a park ranger. I decided I wanted to be a park ranger because I wanted to eat the world's tastiest sandwich. I had the opportunity in my undergraduate studies to travel to Great Smoky Mountains and visit Kuwohi, the highest peak in the park. Great Smoky Mountains can have 12 million visitors every year, and I think that day all of them had decided to go to Kuwohi because it was crowded. There were people left and right, people parking on top of each other's cars, driving around in loops, trying to steal parking spaces. The van we were in could not find a spot, so they let us out and then drove around to try to find what it could. As we were walking out and I saw the hordes of people, in the middle of them I saw a park ranger. She was standing there and she was walking through the crowds and people were stopping to ask her every question. How do I get to the top? Where's the bathrooms? Excuse me, can I take a picture? Where are the bears? Is it hard to hike? She was answering so many questions, taking them in her stride. And then, after she answered the last one, she walked over to the side of the trail. She sat on a low wall, reached into her bag, and she pulled out a sandwich. It was a plain sandwich, white bread, simple cheese, deli meat. But when she looked at that sandwich and she took a bite of it, she took the most satisfied bite I've ever seen anyone take of any sort of food. And in that moment, I knew I wanted to have a job where every lunch I could sit down and be that satisfied with what I did. I wanted to be a park ranger so that I could have the opportunity to eat that sandwich every single day. And so I have. I've had the opportunity to eat that sandwich at so many beautiful places across the country, such as the 500,000 acres of wilderness that borders Tennessee and North Carolina, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, where I started my career with the Park Service. From working there, I had the opportunity to meet someone who would go on to become my boss at Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. There I had so many cool opportunities interpreting not just our natural resources, but also important and challenging parts of our history. From both the experiences both of those places, I had the opportunity here to Acadia National Park and have a wonderful time protecting these resources and learning about a habitat so different from my native Georgia. I don't know where I will get to go next, but I know that I will be able to see somewhere incredible and another wonderful part of this nation, which is an opportunity I've had since becoming an environmental educator with the Park Service. I want to spend my last couple of moments with y'all going back to that kindergarten classroom for a moment, to that little boy who signed so excited to me after I did my best to make him feel welcome in that program. As we were wrapping up the program and the students began to file out, heading off to other classrooms to continue a busy day of learning, I managed to get to chat with a few of them, and the interpreter who was with the group came up with the student, and we chatted for a little bit. I asked him how he liked the rocks, what were his favorites, got myself a high five. As I was leaving, I stopped with the interpreter and asked if she knew what it was he had signed to me near the beginning of the program. And I learned that what he had signed was that you and I are friends because you and I can talk. By making that effort to communicate, he had found that we could forge that friendship. That is something huge that I've learned in the Park Service, and something that drives me as an environmental educator, is finding a way to make that connections between people and their natural resources, myself and my audience, and just any people with each other. If I can give you one final tip as a young professional, I would say this. As you go out through your careers, don't look for contacts, don't look for references, don't look for people that you can put down on lists that you have known. Look for friendships. Look for connections you can forge with people, with your work, and with your passions. As you move through the journey of life, find opportunities to make those connections because that will serve you well, both emotionally and professionally. And on the subject of professional service, I will finish by just letting you know that if you are interested in eating the world's greatest sandwich with me, the United States government is about to start flying jobs for summer 2025 seasonals on usjobs.gov. Interpretational seasons will start posting most of them on October 21st, a couple Mondays from now. So it is a great time to start looking into a federal resume and finding ways to prepare for those. As I leave, I want you to know that I really would love to hear from you. I've listed my emails, both my personal email and my federal email. Note that my federal email has an underscore between my first and last name. Please reach out to me if you have questions, if you want support or are interested in applying for federal jobs, or you just want to ask any further questions. We can be friends if you send that email and start that opportunity for us to talk. Thank you so much for listening to me today, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
That was our wonderful sea educator, Chris Silcox, Ranger Chris Silcox, sorry, who happens to work with our education fellow, Lauren Knierim. And actually, I know for a fact that Chris is eating the world's best sandwich again today while he's leading a group of students on, I think, Isla Ho. And I did see a question in the chat a little earlier from Chief Brian Valentino. He says, for oddly specific purposes, I'm wondering if any of our guest speakers have a background in scouting or any similar or related youth programs. And actually, Chief Brian Valentino, Chris Silcox was a Boy Scout, was an Eagle Scout for many years, and he led many Boy Scout programs very successfully in his home state of Georgia. And I think that is really where he honed his environmental ed skills. I think at this point in time, he's been doing environmental ed for 10 years. And I personally think he's a master of his craft. I don't know. I'm curious. Ryan Mock just mentioned that to me. Yeah, I'm so happy I was able to share that with you. We really admire Chris. He's such a fantastic educator. He brings so much joy to teaching kids about how to appreciate the outdoors and can stay curious while also staying safe. Yeah, if any of our other presenters have any experience with youth programming that they would like to share about, I'd love to hear it.
I think only that I was a participant when I was a brownie, which is the most delicious Girl Scout name ever. Probably until I was about 9, but I'm curious to hear about others.
Becca, do you feel like being...
Yeah, none.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going, Lisa. Sorry.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. I was just going to ask a follow-up, Becca. Do you feel like being a brownie impacted your choice of career in any way?
I think maybe if most people, you have overnight stays at generally wilderness camps or wilderness with a little W, and you learn the essence of, old army equipment that your parents think you need for when you're going on some sort of exhibition, and really it's just going down the street to your local stay away camp. But yeah, Will was going to say something, so I'm happy to pass that to him.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Becca. I did not do any scouting as a kid, but I did we did a really cool program in Maine called the Maine Youth Wilderness Leadership Program, which was like a 7-day backpacking and like wilderness and leadership skills thing and up in Baxter through Friends of Baxter. I think they still do it. And it's for, I believe, if it's still the same, it's for like sophomores and juniors in high school. That was a really awesome experience. I'm still friends with a lot of folks that did that with. Um, yeah, would highly recommend that to any Maine youths who are interested in this, like kind of getting into this space and also gaining some wilderness skills. And also shout out to Baxter for being an amazing part of Maine also.
Wow, that's awesome. It's amazing that that experience still stays with you, Will, and that you still keep in touch with those people way back then. Let's see, Brady Richards. I currently work for Jack Burley's previous Viz position at Acadia. I was in scouting throughout K through 12 and am a former employee at Philmont Scout Ranch, giant scouting backpacking. It's so great to hear everyone's stories. Do any of the rest of the presenters have any like youth programming, education experience that they want to share? Trevor or Lauren, do you guys have anything that you would want to share on that front?
I don't think so. I think if anybody else has any big questions for our presenters throughout our hour and 15 minutes, now would be the perfect time to kind of get some of those answers to those questions, if anybody has any. Yes, the Scudic staff at Rockefeller Hall.
So for people who had a career and then decided to go back to graduate school, how did you make that decision? And what do you intend to use that degree for, or why did you make that decision?
I think that's me and Becca. So it's for when Will. Okay, sorry. Oh, should have listened better. Um, I alluded to my reason a little bit because is that I really wanted to be able to process the data that I was collecting. And being a field tech, you're really so busy working in the field that you can't actually learn like data management skills as easily as if you just need it, if you just go back to school and that's your job is to like learn. So that is why I did it.
For me, it was really about knowing that in the future, the two sort of like pathways that I'm most interested in, I think, are either teaching at the university or college level, or I've kind of really come to love the nonprofit conservation world, and to continue to do sort of like research at a higher level within that sphere, I need a PhD. So for me, it's very much driven by like, to do what I want to do, I need those three letters. And the education that goes with that. So I guess just like being a part of that field, really like I love it enough that I really want to stay with it and progress in it. And yeah, to do that, you need more degrees.
I would say to wrap that up, a lot of people who are probably our mentors and folks did get by with an undergraduate degree and or a master's degree and worked on PhD level work, which was really awesome back then. But I think speaking to both of your points is something where if you need to, you have that institutional knowledge, but you want to have that foundation and then work on that and jump off of that. Also, I think the networking that happens within academia is so much greater than I could even like kind of put my tendrils out. So I think that was also something that was really interesting, keeping one foot in the water there, so to speak. And I think also personally, I wanted to do grad school before I had kids. I think that was a really big thing that a lot of people had told me, and I think was a really wise thing, but it can be done before you have children too, or after you have children as well.
I want to take this opportunity to ask a question to each of our speakers about how do you feel your time here in Acadia or Acadia and Scudic Institute impacted your career? Did you feel like it changed you in any way, or it changed your idea of what you wanted to do? Um, I personally think, and I think a lot of you mentioned this as well, that Acadia is a really special place, and I want to hear about how that's impacted your guys' lives. Does anyone want to start?
Sure, I'll start. I'll bite. Um, yeah, I mean, I felt like Acadia and by extension Bar Harbor and Scudic Institute, I think it had a really great workplace culture and sense of community. Something I really appreciated was the fact that even though I was VIS, I had a lot of opportunities to, like I mentioned, go out with researchers and interact with those folks. I was also able to participate in search and rescue and the EMS aspects of it. And yeah, I think just kind of having that support and investment in our careers was incredibly valuable to have.
Yeah, for me, I feel like, being in ecology fields education is my first job out of college, and is where I kind of discovered my love for field work and um, working in a variety of environments like mudflats or their forests or their intertidal, and getting to participate in a range of research projects. And yeah, it was a really great opportunity to kind of see a lot of different areas of science research and ecology, and yeah, inspired my desire to continue working outside and learning more.
Yeah, I'm hearing that Scudic and working your time here, working at Scudic Institute was a nice like bridge from college to early career, and then also that you got to do a lot of exploration, exploring different scientific interests. Yeah, that's awesome. And you're still in Maine. You chose to stay in Maine.
Yeah, I'm in Portland now, and plan on staying in Maine. It's a beautiful state, so yeah, that definitely contributed.
Yeah. So, Will or Marisa or Becca?
I can go. For me, working in Acadia has been really interesting because of, I guess, just the geographic layout of the park is that it's really integrated with the community. And in previous parks I worked in, it's just like a vast wilderness that takes several hours to get to and to get through. So working with volunteers in those parks was a lot different. It was more of a lift to try to get people actually just up there, including students. It was really difficult, even in Sequoia. Just getting students on a bus for 45 minutes was a big impediment. So that working in the community in Acadia has been really special because people have lived there that I'm working with for 30 years, and some people are new students, maybe at like COA. But it's just much more integrated. And so if my work, I really think about how we can repair our relationship with the ecosystem we're in, and that's really a possible thing in Acadia since we're living amongst all this parkland.
Yeah, totally agreed about this kind of the way that Acadia is situated in Mount Desert Island facilitates so many important partnerships that allow for awesome work to go on in the park. And then also bringing in like citizen science um, volunteers on your project, for example, like that's possible because of the proximity of the park to so many residents nearby. Will or Becca?
All right, I'll go. Yeah, I feel like it's like two facets for me. One is just growing up in the Bar Harbor, Mount Desert Island community, and having Acadia really like as my home was just super powerful and influential, like I talked about earlier. And getting to work with friends of Acadia in the park was really awesome because I got to get exposed to a lot of you know scientists and educators and all of these people who really care super deeply about Acadia as a place and just about like the environment in general. And I think like having a lot of those sort of people to look up to when I was working for Friends of Acadia was really important. And it also, for Acadia as sort of like an environmental nonprofit, was my intro into that world that I still live in, and so that was really powerful too.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Thanks for sharing. Becca?
Sure, I know we're over time, but I would think as most subjects, the more you get into it, the less you feel like you know. And so I really feel like with Acadia, that kind of it's how it feels at first. You like know everything. You're like, yeah, this is great. But then as soon as you start to learn the facets of what makes up this environment and ecosystem, it's lifelong learning beyond even lifelong. It spans generations and which is really encouraging. And I think the more you know about, I mean, Acadia specifically, the more I understand that there are specific units in the national park that also deal with the same situations, and you don't have to feel like you're alone. There are other people that are dealing with similar situations, but Acadia has really taught me a lot in that way. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much for all your wonderful questions and answers and stories. I'll pass it off to Trevor to close us out.
Yeah, I thank you so much to our wonderful speakers once again. It was just a lovely hour and a half of hearing all about y'all's story. I want to acknowledge that the work for both Schoodic Institute and Acadia National Park falls within the homeland of the Wabanaki people of the Dawnland, which includes the federally recognized tribes of the Micmac, the Maliseet, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot people. I once again, one big thank you to our presenters and for everyone who came today. I want to thank Schoodic Institute, specifically Shannon O'Brien and then Emma Albee for being our kind of stewards in this whole process. It was very nice for them to kind of just give the reins to us and be able to put this whole thing together. I want to thank the National Park Service and then the National Parks Foundation, as well as the Kathy and Jim Giro Acadia Early Career Fellowship, with which we wouldn't be able to do this. So, and also thanks Louisa and Lauren for co-producing this lovely conversation. So once again, this will be up, if not within the week, this presentation in video format on the Schoodic YouTube page. And then pre-symposium, symposium next week. Hope to see a lot of familiar faces there. Thanks again, everyone, for coming out.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all.